Welcome to Golden Blue, everybody, home of the college football fan. And don't forget about the checklist. Hat check, sunglasses check, Pepsi check, notes check, sources check, and thick skin is a check. And don't forget to send gear to represent your team and yourself in my background. Send it to P.O. Box 360, Liberty, South Carolina, 29657, and get yourself a shout out. On to the next video. In case you're wondering, these are the teams that we don't have represented for the mini helmets. As you can see, we actually have quite a few big brands that's not represented here at Golden Blue. I do know that Nevada and Cincinnati are on their way as far as mini helmet representation. So get your team represented here on Golden Blue. We're about to hit 13,000 subscribers. And you already know what time it is, so might as well sit down, brace yourself, and buckle up because you are entering the speculation zone. Yes, this will most certainly be a Get It Gang video. What is the Get It Gang? Get It Gang is basically a name that I came up with for the group of people that leave video ideas in the comment section of my videos. So if you think you have a good video idea, leave it in the comment section of my videos and I just might use it on my next video. Real quickly, shout out to everybody supporting Golden Blue. We just hit 13,000 subscribers today. Without you guys, it would not be possible at all. So keep watching Golden Blue. Tell a friend, share my videos, hit the like button, leave comments in the comment section, and that's how Golden Blue will continue to grow. So shout out to you guys for making all this possible. On to today's video. So the Get It Gang comment that I'm using is from Jason Matson. He says, yesterday, Locked On Pac-12 looked at the Pac-12 TV ratings and normalized the numbers to be without games against USC or UCLA for about 10 years. First was UO, Oregon, then UW, Washington, UU, Utah, followed by WSU, Washington State. Next came the Bay schools, Cal, Stanford, then the Arizona schools, Arizona, Arizona State. Bracketed OSU, Oregon State, and CU, Colorado. Interestingly, the three presidents joining the executive committee are Stanford's Tessier Levine, Washington State's Schultz, and Washington's Cos. Clearly, the fate of the Pac-12 lives in the state of Washington. I did not know that. Want a conspiracy theory? Of course. UO, Oregon is built on Phil Knight's support. Knight is 85. What happens when he is no longer a part of Oregon's story? Does Oregon's bling diminish? Does that make Washington State a better match? Research for Oregon is in the 150 million range, where Wazoo is over 300 million. Wow. Gregory Garza says this. Are you saying Fresno State is more desirable to the Big 12 than Oregon State and Washington State? I think those two schools fit better culturally than Fresno. ESPN would pay for those two schools, but not Fresno State. Big 12 would get their PST window. That's right, because Brett Yormark wants that Pacific time zone. So there's a lot of options out there. Stanford and Cal off the board. Not going to happen. They'll either go to the Big 10, stay in the Pac-12, or go independent. So you can't get those. So then there's Oregon and Washington. Maybe the Big 12 can pull Oregon and Washington, but that's at the mercy of the Big 10. I do think the Pac-12 is going to go down in the water, and Oregon and Washington will both. The question is, will the Big 10 be interested in those teams, or do they want to focus on the ACC and try to get teams over there? If they focus on the ACC and Oregon and Washington don't have a spot in the Big 10, then Oregon and Washington could end up in the Big 12. But if they go to the Big 10, then you could be looking at Oregon State and Washington State making the jump to the Big 12. And yes, I do think that the Big 12 should look at those two teams. I do think that those two teams would be more willing to jump to the Big 12 over Oregon and Washington. So even if it's just as a backup plan, keep Oregon State and Washington State in the back of your mind if you're Brett Yormark. You want that Pacific time zone. Those are still Power 5 teams. Oregon State is investing a lot into their football facilities. And Washington State has one of the biggest fan bases in the entire nation. Top 25, one of the biggest in the Pac-12 right now. But if you can't get those two, that's when you start looking at Fresno State and San Diego State. And we heard rumors that the Big 12 was having brief conversations with Fresno State. I actually think they were trying to wall Fresno State out of the Pac-12. Not keep them out, like blackball them, but make sure they know that the Pac-12 is in a bad situation. Listen, don't help the Pac-12. We want the Pac-12 to sink. You guys will have a better future if the Pac-12 sinks, and then we can pick you up later on. So they're trying to keep teams that the Pac-12 want out of the Pac-12. They could have done the same thing to San Diego State and SMU. I don't know. We know that the Pac-12 was interested in San Diego State and SMU, but for whatever reason, the announcement hasn't happened. We haven't heard an announcement that the Pac-12 has actually invited and accepted San Diego State and SMU. What happened? I was hearing there for 3 weeks solid. Yes, Golden Blue. The Pac-12 has invited and voted on and accepted San Diego State and SMU. But there was no press release, nothing in the news. Nothing out of my Pac-12 sources telling me that. I knew they were interested in them, but what happened? Is it because of this TV deal and nobody's signing the grant of rights? They're putting that vote on hold. I don't know. What I am saying is keep your eyes on the Washington teams. For the Big 12, you might want to think about grabbing Oregon State, Washington. That gives you the Pacific time zone. And I do think that they're better brands than Fresno State and San Diego State. No offense to my San Diego State and Fresno State subscribers. It just is what it is. Fresno State and San Diego State, they are growing brands. They are good brands. but Oregon State and Washington State are more established brands. Maybe in the next 5 years, Fresno State and San Diego State would overtake Washington State and Oregon State as far as brand strength. But as of right now, Oregon State and Washington State has better brand strength than Fresno State and San Diego State. That's all I'm saying. I'm not talking down to or looking down on San Diego State, Fresno State. I'm just saying as of right now, your brand strength not quite there. Almost, but not quite there. Not as high as Oregon State and Washington State. My question is this. Could Washington and Washington State be on the boards as far as for the Big Ten? I know we've been hearing about Washington, Oregon. Should be the next pickup for the Big Ten. Well, we know that Washington, Oregon applied to the Big Ten and they were turned down. What if that's because of Oregon? And we know that Oregon has the biggest TV ratings for the past 10 years, but they don't have nearly as much research money as Washington State. And Washington State is still top 4. They're not number 1, but they're top 4. So yes, grabbing Oregon and Washington, you get number 1, number 2. But grabbing Washington State, you're getting number 2 and number 4. And you're getting way more research money than Oregon. That's why I think Stanford and Cal might be actually above Washington, Oregon, because their research money is ridiculous. It's crazy. It's elite. Nobody outdoes Cal and Stanford whenever it comes to academics and research. But if you're not taking them because their football brands are just that bad, and you want somebody that has at least a decent football brand, then Washington State could actually take the place of Oregon. And we heard talks where they were trying to pass legislation to lock in Washington State. Wherever one goes, the other one has to go as well. Well, that fell through, so that's not happening. But still, I could see the Big Ten going after Washington and Washington State because you're getting 2 really good football brands. And on top of that, you're getting 2 really good research programs. And I'm not saying Oregon's research program isn't good. It's just nowhere close to Washington State's. In fact, Washington State basically doubles up on research money over Oregon. A lot of things to take into consideration. And Phil Knight is 85. The commenter is correct. He's getting old. He's not going to be around for that much longer. I'm not trying to talk morbidly, but facts are facts. What happens whenever Phil Knight is gone? Does Oregon lose some of that appeal? Because we know it was Phil Knight that was advocating for them to the Big Ten. Once he's gone, does their shine kind of diminish? Like the commenter mentioned, the 3 presidents joined the executive committee, 1 from Stanford, the other 2 from Washington and Washington State. So that's another big thing. If the Big Ten grabs Washington State, they're actually grabbing 2 of the members that are on the executive committee on the Pac-12 as well. You talk about hurting the Pac-12, that would do it significantly. Do what's best for the Big Ten, and I think what's best for the Big Ten could be Washington and Washington State, not Washington and Oregon. I'm not saying Oregon's a bad brand, not at all. Of course, they were number 1 in TV ratings. You can't dispute that. Number 1. Not counting games against USC and UCLA for everybody. But still, their research nowhere close to what Washington State is, and the Big Ten puts a premium on that research money in AAU status. So we could be looking at the Washington schools, Washington and Washington State headed to the Big Ten. Maybe the Big 12 could pick up Oregon and Oregon State at that point, because if that happens, if the Big Ten gets Washington and Washington State, then Oregon has to know that it's not happening. If they get into the Big Ten, it will be with Washington. But if the Big Ten chooses Washington State with Washington, then Oregon is not getting into the Big Ten, and Oregon will not stay on the sinking ship known as the Pac-12, especially making crappy money. So it could be actually Oregon and Oregon State for the Big 12, and that would be a dream scenario for the Big 12. The only thing better for the Big 12 would be Washington, Oregon. I just don't see that happening. But I do see the possibility of the Big 10 grabbing Washington and Washington State, and then the Big 12 would be certainly getting Oregon, Oregon State. So could it be that the Big 12 is destined to receive Oregon, Oregon State, Arizona, Arizona State, Utah, and Colorado? For the Big 12, that is a dream scenario. For a West Virginia fan, that is a travel nightmare. I'm actually hoping this doesn't happen. It's great for the Big 12, but it's terrible for West Virginia. I need the Big 12 to grab some teams on the east side of the Big 12. That's why I'm hoping the ACC dissolves and the Big 12 goes out and gets Syracuse, Pitt, Louisville, and Virginia Tech. Those are the 4 teams that I want the Big 12 to get. That would help West Virginia tremendously. And it would help the Big 12 tremendously because you're not just helping West Virginia, but you're also helping Cincinnati and UCF. So y'all let me know in the comments section. Number 1, who, if anybody, from the Pac-12 ultimately ends up in the Big 10? Do you think it's Washington, Oregon, Washington State, or Cal and Stanford? Number 2, if the Big 10 does get Washington and Washington State, do you think the fate of Oregon is sealed and they're going to the Big 12 with Oregon State, Arizona, Arizona State, Colorado, and Utah? Number 3, if all that happens, do you think Fresno State and San Diego State are actually screwed? We can't forget about those brands. They're trying to get into the Pac-12. Maybe if they don't get into the Pac-12, they can get to the Big 12, but if all this other stuff happens, then they're going to be put on the back burner, and it could be bad news for Fresno State and San Diego State. That's all I got for this show. Like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you on my next show.